Welcome, everyone, to today's Explainer. I'm thrilled to have you here because we are about to completely shatter what we thought we knew about the rise and the really catastrophic fall of the ancient Maya. You know, for decades, we historians thought we had the historical record pretty much entirely figured out. But hidden beneath nearly 2 million square miles of lush green canopy, a lost world has been keeping some massive secrets. So today, put on your explorer's hat because we are going to dive into the archaeological record. We're going to trace the rise of a society that was just as complex as our own, and then we'll examine the terrifying perfect storm that brought the whole shebang crashing down.
All right, let's look at our syllabus for today. We're going to cover how lasers reveal hidden cities, rewriting the Maya cradle, America's first middle class, engineering through the drought, and finally, a dramatic political collapse.
Starting with Part 1, lasers reveal hidden cities, uncovering secrets beneath the canopy. To really grasp this huge historical paradigm shift, we first need to understand the modern superpower that archaeologists are using to literally see through millions of trees without touching a single leaf. Because for a long time, the dense jungle canopy of Central America was the ultimate barrier. We walked right over sprawling ancient suburbs without ever having a clue they were right under our boots.
Enter a real game changer, LiDAR. Think of it like X-ray vision for archaeologists. Basically, an aircraft flies over the jungle, firing countless streams of light pulses down to the ground. By measuring the exact microsecond it takes for those pulses to bounce back, researchers can digitally strip away the entire forest. Suddenly, and I mean overnight, we're revealing over 800 square miles of hidden roads, temples, and massive engineering feats in the Maya Biosphere Reserve. It's an absolute treasure map of a sprawling, sophisticated society that would make any modern city planner incredibly proud.
Moving to Part 2. Rewriting the Maya cradle, a shocking discovery in the north. For decades, the strict academic consensus was that Maya civilization was born exclusively down in the south. But new evidence from the northern Yucatan changes absolutely everything.
We used to believe that early kings in the southern Mirador Basin built all the first monumental cities, right? And the north? Well, we thought it was only settled hundreds of years later by desperate refugees fleeing a southern collapse around 700 AD. But looking at the timeline of the archaeological record now, a totally different picture builds. In the northern town of Cuic, archaeologists dug into an 800 AD pyramid and found something that frankly blew their minds, a 500 AD building foundation buried underneath it. That means there was a thriving settlement there way before any southern refugees showed up. Combine that with the discovery of 100 BC cave paintings in the north, which beautifully depict skeletal jaguars in the underworld, and we have absolute proof that the north was occupied at the very dawn of Maya civilization.
The historical contrast here is just staggering. We aren't looking at some rugged northern outpost of scattered refugee hamlets. Thanks to LiDAR and this newly rewritten timeline, we can clearly see the ancient north in the Yucatan region was a previously unknown, sprawling mega-society, entirely on par with those famous ancient kingdoms of the south. It was just as old, just as complex, and just as powerful. There wasn't just one cradle of the Maya, guys. There were multiple cradles evolving simultaneously.
Okay, Part 3. America's first middle class. Daily life at the stairway to heaven. So, who exactly populated this booming northern mega-society?
Well, we tend to picture ancient societies as a tiny handful of ultra-wealthy royals ruling over massive populations of impoverished peasants, right? But the northern Maya totally disrupt that assumption. If we zoom in on an estate near Cuic, dubbed the Stairway to Heaven, we find a massive 200-foot hilltop complex crowned by a sprawling 9 to 10-room stone residence. Honestly, picture a 9th-century McMansion. This right here represents America's first middle class. These were prosperous citizens living the Maya dream, managing lands and returning to elaborate stone homes at the end of the day. Nearly a millennium before the colonial era, skilled workers and wealthy plantation owners were building incredibly robust communities of their own.
And how do we know they were living large? Through an incredible piece of forensic evidence. Archaeologists found human bones buried under the floorboards of these estates, which was actually a secondary burial practice meant to sanctify the home. But the cool part is the chemical analysis of the 1,200-year-old plaque stuck to the teeth of these ancestors. It reveals a highly diverse, wealthy diet. They weren't just scraping by. They were dining on rich, aromatic stews packed with squash, beans, tree fruits, and fiery chili peppers. They were a genuinely thriving, prosperous class of people.
Which brings us to Part 4. Engineering through the drought, surviving a landscape without water. Because, of course, there was a catch to living the Maya dream in the northern Puc region.
Thriving here meant living in an environment with absolutely no rivers, no lakes, and no streams. Zero.
Now, water is the foundation of literally any civilization. So how on earth do you build a booming mega society in a place where no rain falls for 6 continuous months out of the year? Well, to survive, they became master hydrologists. They ingeniously engineered their estate patios, their massive plazas, and their flat rooftops to act as giant funnels. Every single drop of seasonal rainwater drained into sophisticated man-made underground limestone cisterns known as chultuns. The sheer physical effort required for this engineering is astounding. They didn't just grab a shovel and dig a hole. They manually bored a narrow shaft straight through dense limestone caprock. Then, they hollowed out the softer earth underneath to create a massive subterranean chamber. And finally, they sealed the entire inside with a thick layer of waterproof, pinkish stucco. They essentially carved massive, underground liquid foundations for their cities out of pure bedrock.
Get this, each one of these cisterns could hold up to 10,000 gallons of perfectly preserved water. The Stairway to Heaven estate alone had 8 of these scattered across the property. Let's do the math on that. That means this single middle-class estate could comfortably support 7 entire families through 3 completely rainless months. It's just a staggering feat of decentralized civic engineering.
And finally, Part 5, a dramatic political collapse, the sudden end of a booming society. This is where we get into a truly dramatic environmental and political saga. By the 9th century, right in the middle of this massive economic boom, construction across the north screeched to a sudden halt. In the royal palaces of Kiewik, archaeologists actually found half-finished walls and massive piles of construction scaffolding left exactly where the workers had been standing. This wasn't a society in a slow, creeping decline. This was a king feeling powerful, expanding his palace, and then, boom, everything simply stopped. At the Stairway to Heaven estate, beautiful ceramic pots were found neatly stacked against the interior walls. Listen, this wasn't some panicked, chaotic flight from an invading army where things get smashed and left in the dirt. It was a carefully planned departure. They tidied up the house, loaded what they could carry onto their backs, and orderly abandoned their magnificent stone homes. So, why did they leave so carefully? The evidence, locked deep in soil cores and ancient architecture, shows they were hit by a catastrophic perfect storm. It was a deadly 1-2 punch, severe environmental stress, specifically back-to-back extreme droughts lasting anywhere from 3 to 20 years, colliding with a sudden, devastating political fracture. The rain stopped, and those brilliant cisterns simply dried up. But here's the great mystery. The Maya were not strangers to drought. As historians point out, they were literally a civilization designed to respond to these exact conditions. I mean, they had survived dry spells for 1,500 years. They carefully packed up their homes because they fully expected to come back when the rains eventually returned. So why didn't they? The final nail in the coffin was a destabilizing new political ideology that distracted the ruling class right when they needed to be hyper-focused on survival. The cult of Quetzalcoatl, or the Feathered Serpent, swept through the north in the 800s. It demanded rigorous initiation and pretty painful bloodletting rituals from local kings. This aggressive new ideology created intense rivalries and completely fractured traditional Maya governance. So, when those extreme droughts hit, the political establishment was already in total disarray. There was simply no stable government left intact to organize their return to the cities once the climate finally stabilized. All right, let's wrap up with this final thought. The story of the ancient Maya isn't just about old rocks hiding out in a jungle. It's a massive wake-up call. They were a sprawling mega-society. They had brilliant engineering, vast wealth, and a thriving middle class. Yet, they were quietly swallowed by the forest because environmental stress triggered a political fracture they just couldn't recover from. It leaves us to wonder, if it happened to them at the absolute height of their power, what vulnerabilities are hiding right under our own noses today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this leaves you looking at our own society with a brand new, fascinating perspective. Catch you next time.